Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here, and I am back again with another Digital Juice tutorial, and this time we're going to take a look at getting started with animated shoulder sets for Adobe's Premiere Pro. Now, as I started all my getting started with tutorials, I've got to remind you that if you haven't downloaded the most recent version of the Juicer, you need to head on over to the Digital Juice website and download it. It's an absolutely free download for Windows and for Mac, and as of this recording, the most recent version of the Juicer is Juicer 3.89D Build 270. Again, an absolutely free download for Windows and for all versions of Mac, including Mountain Lion. Now, a couple things I want to point out before we get started. Animated Shoulder Sets is a downloadable product. Why do we love that? Well, we love that because once you make your purchase of either the full version or one of the a la carte options, you're going to have immediate access to it inside of your Digital Juice account. And obviously the second great feature, which I did just touch on, is the fact that you can buy animated shoulder sets as the full collection, or you have the option of going in and buying individual items one at a time, or a few at a time, depending on what your needs are. That's another great feature of these new downloadable products. You have this fantastic option. So what's going to happen once you make your purchase? Well, let's navigate up here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into my Digital Juice account right here, and I'm just going to sign in right here. And once I've signed in, I'm going to navigate up to the Your Account section of the Digital Juice website. I'm going to navigate right over here to the left to the Digital Juice Downloads. And inside of here, you're going to notice that I have my 3 animated shoulder sets collections. Now, you're going to notice that I don't have the icons here. Now, that's fine. Don't worry. Once you make your purchase, you will. I'm actually recording this tutorial before the product has even launched. That's why I don't have those icons right there. But once you've made your purchase, you're going to see the icon for whichever animated shoulder set collection you've purchased, whether it's for After Effects, for Sony's Vegas Pro, or for Adobe's Premiere Pro. Now, in this case, we are talking about Premiere Pro. So what we're going to do is we're going to navigate down to the Premiere Pro Animated Shoulder Sets collection, and you're going to see that we have a drop down to Show the Available Files for Download. I'm simply going to click on that. And what you actually see here is a little bit different than what you'll see when you make your purchase. Now, for me, because I'm doing the Getting Started with tutorial, I actually have access to the full collection, which is the first 3 downloads right here. You'll see Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3, and it tells me that it's all 10 Premiere projects. So if you've made a purchase of the entire collection, that's what you're going to see inside the download section of your account. Now, if you decide to make one of the a la carte purchases, you're just going to see the individual item that you've purchased. One thing I also love is the fact that I can actually get in and see how big each one of these projects is. Very handy to have and very handy to know. Now, in most cases, what you're going to be doing, if you made the full purchase, you'll just download each one of these 3 parts. Now, in this case, what I've decided to do is something a little bit different for this tutorial than I did for the After Effects version. I've decided to actually download 2 of the individual sets because I want to go through the installation for those and show you how that's going to work. Now, if you want to see how the installation for the full version is going to work, check out the After Effects version of the Animated Shoulder Sets Getting Started with tutorial, and you can see how that's going to work. I want to change things up a little bit because I know everyone likes to watch all of these tutorials, so I want to try to do something a little bit different every time. Okay, so once you've actually got in and either downloaded the full version, all 3 parts, or one of the a la carte options here, you're going to want to get into the Juicer and install this product. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to minimize Firefox, and let's jump into the Juicer, and let's get started with installation and organization. Okay, so let's Alt and Tab into the Juicer, obviously Command and Tab for all of my Mac friends out there. And the first thing we need to do is to install one of our downloadable a la carte elements for animated shoulder sets. And what we're going to do is just navigate over to the File dropdown. And we're not going to come down to Install Products. We're going to go one step further and come down to Install Downloaded Content. Once I select that, you'll see I actually have 2 of the elements right here. I have Solid Proof and I have Surface Hues. Now, I've actually already installed Surface Hues, so I'm just going to select Solid Proof. And what we're going to do is simply say Open. You'll see I'm brought to the Juicer 3 license window. I'm simply going to say I agree. I'm going to say Continue. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to install this into Digital Juice. That's on my external drive. What I'm going to do is simply say Install, and you're getting a real-time view of how long it takes to install one of these elements onto, in this case, like I said, an external hard drive. You'll see it actually is not taking that long. What's going to happen is that it's going to actually jump down in chunks. You'll see it sort of hung a little bit at 11%, and then zings right along to 100%. And the first thing that happens is once it's actually installed into the juicer, it's immediately going to open the category that it falls into. And in this case, it sort of takes a little bit of the thunder out of, me telling you that, you have to come down to projects and templates. You have to go into the Adobe Premiere Pro projects. And that's just another great thing about the juicer, is that you don't need to go searching for it once it's installed. If, you don't know where it might be, the juicer is going to show you exactly where it is. And like I said, in this case, it's in projects and templates and in the Adobe Premiere Pro projects category. Now, obviously, the only problem with this is that I, seem to have a lot of elements, considering I only installed one item. Well, we're actually looking at a couple things here. We're actually looking at some animated shoulder sets, and we're also looking at simplicity in here. So how do we navigate through and figure out what is what? Well, that's where we're going to use filter mode. I love filter mode. I use it all the time. And I'm going to show you how I use filter mode, pretty much about 99.5% of the time. You'll see that we have a few options here on the left side, right under filter mode. We have set, we have resolution, and we have product. Now, since the product is pretty much all HD, that's really not going to help us. But what is going to help us is that we know what product that we want to look for. So all I'm going to do now is I'm simply going to drop down the product filter, and under there I only have a few options. I'm just going to drag the window over here just a little bit so we can see everything. There we go. We have all, which obviously fairly self-explanatory. That's going to show us everything as far as Adobe Premiere Pro projects. Then we obviously have Animated Shoulder Sets Collection 1, which is what we're going to want, and we have Simplicity Collection 1. So all I'm going to do to see the Animated Shoulder Sets is I'm simply going to click on it. Once I do, there are the two elements that I have that I've installed, essentially ready for me to export from the juicer and work with inside of Premiere Pro. Now, a couple other things that I do want to talk about before I export these elements and show you how simple they are to use in Premiere. First thing is I like to talk about the tabs up at the top, because there's something that people kind of ignore them in a lot of cases, and sometimes with certain products, you're going to get some hidden gems that you might not know you had. Now, in this case, I don't know if I'm actually going to have anything in here, because basically what happens is that when you install these animated elements, depending on the actual a la carte item that you install, you're going to get some, like I just said, animated elements, and there they actually are. So we have 4 of them that were installed when we installed these 2 templates. And the cool thing about these elements, if I select them here, I'm just going to drag the preview window down a little bit here, I'm just going to play it. These animated elements can actually be used in any project I might want to use them, and I don't need to just use them with the animated shoulder sets. Let's just check out the next one here. We'll just hit play. Very cool, a transition effect. We've got the background here, and it actually tells me right down here at the bottom what it's for. It's for surface hues. And this one here is for solid proof. Now, I'm going to get into talk a little bit, if you don't actually see that at the bottom of your thumbnail, I'm going to talk about how we can show that in just a second. But what's important to keep in mind, like I said about these elements, is that we can really use them in anything. The only thing that's important to remember is how we get in and export them. Now, before I show you that, it's also important to remember that, we do have 2 transitions in here. We have this transition right here. I'll just hit play again here. And then what we have here is we have a revealer for one of our elements here. Very cool. So maybe we had some video behind there, some words behind there. You can have this animate on, put the word in right there, and then have it reveal it just like that. And what's important to keep in mind is that obviously, essentially these are both sort of like transitions, and we're going to need alpha channels with them. And you can see right down here at the bottom of the thumbnail that we actually have a little icon that tells us that there is an alpha channel with these elements. Now, to actually get these elements out of the juicer is very simple. You'll see I have the little film can icon. If I click on it, I have a few options. I can add to batch. I can show where this was installed when I installed the initial a la carte elements. I can send this directly to an application like After Effects to work with directly, or I can open it in an external editor if I happen to have one set up. And in most cases, what you're going to do is you're simply going to add to batch. Once you've added it to the batch panel, I'm simply going to click on the settings button. What's going to happen now is that we're now essentially in the settings panel right over here on the left, and we have a preview panel in the middle. What we're going to do is we're going to set this up just to export with an alpha channel. I'm going to show you how easy this is to do. Now, in most cases with an element like this, you're going to want it at, as big as pretty much HD will allow you. So that's 1920 by 1080. Now, for me, I normally work in 23,976 frames per second. That right there tells me that what I'm doing is going to be progressive, and that's going to be important in just a second. Now, you'll see the duration is only 2 seconds long at its normal speed. I'm not going to speed that up. The normal speed is pretty much how I would want this. Now, if you need to get in and do some adjustments to the actual element itself, you need to scale it up, scale it down, reposition it, rotate it, you can do that right in here under the layer dropdown. But for us, the next most important section is the actual output section. Now, the very first option we have is to render the alpha separately if we wanted to. In most cases, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave the alpha embedded in the QuickTime file. Now you remember I said that the 23976 is going to have us working in progressive, so we're not going to add any field dominance. There's going to be no field order. We're going to stick with progressive. Now since we're working with QuickTime, I'm just going to stick with QuickTime. I'm just going to say let's go into the format options here. And why don't I just stick with animation? You know, most people like working with animation. Why? Well, most people say, oh, well, it's the best possible quality, etc., etc. To be perfectly honest, that's not the reason that I work with animation, because at the end of the day, really, it's the resolution that you're currently working with in your timeline, which is how you're going to want to render things out. So for example, if you're working in HDV, you're going to want to render things out with an HDV codec. If you're working in Avid DNX, you know, HD 145, that's how you're going to render it out. ProRes just the same. In this case, I'm just using animation. Why? Because I want that important alpha channel, and I know that it's there because I see millions of colors plus alpha. That's really the only reason I would use the animation codec. All I'd have to do is simply say OK. I would choose pre-multiplied as the alpha type, and this element is essentially ready to render out with an alpha channel for me to use in Premiere, in After Effects, even in Media Composer or Symphony. Really, any application that will accept a QuickTime file with an alpha channel, this file is going to be ready to go for. Now, I just wanted to throw that in there because, like I said, these are really sort of little bonus things that you get that in most cases you wouldn't even realize that you had if you didn't go in and click on that tab right here, the animated elements. Now, what I also want to talk about is, I mentioned this earlier, is down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that I have some icons down here, and I actually have the name of the element here as well. Now, for some reason you don't have that there, don't worry, we can get that back. What I'm going to do is just click on templates here for a second. And if you don't have those, like I said, down at the bottom of your thumbnail, let's add them right now. What we're going to do is we're going to navigate right over here to the Customize dropdown, and I'm going to come into the Customize section. And the Customize section is really divided up sort of into two categories. One is the thumbnail, and the other is sort of the things below the thumbnail. You'll see at the top we can get in and we can actually set the thumbnail size to a specific pixel width if we wanted to, or what's probably more, you know, what's really easier is just to say, I'd like to have 2 thumbnails across. Now, if I was to say 2 thumbnails across, you're thinking, well, Kev, you already got 2 thumbnails across. Well, I might, but it's actually set up for 5 thumbnails, which is what I had this set to right here. So if I was to simply say, okay, it's just going to increase the size of those thumbnails and make them much easier to see. But in most cases, like I said, you know, I like to have a few icons on the screen here, so I'm just going to set that back to 5. I can also change the gap around the thumbnails if I wanted to. But here's where what I was talking about before comes into play with the file names and actually having these icons down in the lower right-hand corner of each one of the thumbnails. This is where you can toggle this on and off. Do you want to display the file name, which I do? And you only want to show those icons when you bring the mouse over the thumbnail. For me, that gets to be a little bit annoying if you're dragging the mouse across and all of a sudden all these little icons are, you know, appearing and disappearing at the bottom. I like to just have them there all the time, so I leave that deselected. All I'm going to do is now simply say OK, and everything is going to jump back to normal. Okay, so let's talk about getting one of these elements out of the juicer to work with inside of Premiere Pro. Okay, now much like we exported one of those animated elements, we're going to do something similar to get the project out of the juicer to work with inside of Premiere Pro. So what we're going to do is navigate right back down to this Premiere icon. I'm going to click on it. We have a few options here. Now the first option and the last option are exactly the same. We have collect files and add to batch. Now in this case, if we were to say add to batch, you might think that it would appear over here in the batch panel, but it actually doesn't. If I say add to batch, it's simply going to open the collect files window, which is exactly the same as simply coming in and saying collect files. Now for me, this is normally how I like to work. I always like to come in and make a duplicate of whatever project was installed into the juicer, strictly for backup purposes. It just makes my life a lot easier to have all these new projects in one location, essentially wherever I decide I want them to go. What I'm going to do is just say cancel because, like I said, there's a couple more options in here. I'm just going to come back to the Premiere Pro icon. The next option we have is to simply send the project directly to Premiere Pro. Now in this case, I've already come in and I've set up a location for Premiere Pro, so the juicer knows exactly where it is. Now, how do I know this? Well, I know this because right now you'll see right above the open as new project is not grayed out anymore. So I could simply take this project, send it to Premiere Pro. What's going to happen is that where this project was installed when the juicer did the installation, that's where the juicer is going to look to open this file. Essentially, it's going to double click on it and it's going to open it in Premiere Pro. That's one way you can work. You can also say, show me the containing folder where this project is. You can come in, you can right click on it, and you can say open file location, and you can go right to where this element was installed by the juicer in this case on my external drive. Now, like I said, the problem with working this way is that if you get in and you modify this project and you overwrite it, anytime you try to export it from that point forward, it's going to be with the new revised project, which is something you don't want to do because the only way to get the original back is to go and reinstall everything, not something you want to do. So what I'm going to do is just close everything up here. I'm going to come back into the juicer, and we're just going to do things the way that I always like to work. And that is by simply coming over to the Premiere Pro icon. I'm simply going to click on it, and I'm going to come down to Collect Files. You'll see the juicer is going to want to know, where do I want to collect these files? So I'm just simply going to say to the desktop, I'm going to say Collect Now. You'll see in a matter of seconds the file was exported to the desktop. I'm just going to minimize the juicer here. Here it is right here on the desktop. And what I'm going to do is just drag this over a little bit here. There we go, much easier. And I could double click on the alias, or I could just come into the Full HD folder, and there's the project right there ready for me to double click on and work with inside of Premiere Pro. So why don't I do that? I'm just simply going to double click on it. It's going to take Premiere Pro a second here just to go through all my hundreds and hundreds of plugins. There we go. You'll see, very quick to open though. And the first thing I'm told is, well, hold on a second. This project was created in a previous version of Premiere and it needs to be converted. The original project file will not be modified. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call this For Getting Started with Video, just that I always know which one it is. I'm simply going to say OK. And what's going to happen is that in a second, the media is going to be pending, and there we go. There's the element ready for me to work with. Okay, so it's time now to get in and time to put our talent in, time to put our footage in. Let's get in and let's customize this project exactly how we need it customized. Okay, now the first thing that we're going to need is some footage. So what I'm going to do is simply right click and we're going to say import. And what I'm going to do is I'll just import some footage of some kids from Digital Juice's Video Tracks HD. I'm just going to grab 3 shots here. Let's actually make sure that we don't have ones that are too similar. We'll just double click here. I just want to just see what each one of these are. It's the kids at the playground here. I think that's okay. And let's just sort of slide everything over here. I don't mind if I shrink that window back down. And I'm just going to import one more here. We'll just grab sort of from down at the end. There we go. Very cool. Soccer shot. Okay, awesome. And what I want to do is I want to put these shots into the drop zones. Before I even worry about the chroma key, and what I always try to tell editors when they're working is do the stuff you know first. Worry about that, get that done so you can spend more time on the things that might be a little bit trickier like chroma keying. Okay, so all I'm going to do here is I'm going to get in. I need to figure out exactly where these drop zones are. Well, you know what? It's actually very easy to figure out. You can see right down here on Video Layer 2, I have something called, appropriately enough, Video Zone. What I'm going to do is simply double click on that, and once I do, you'll see there are my 3 drop zones ready to have footage put in place of those placeholders. So all we're going to do is I'm going to take the first shot here. I'm just going to drop it in here. I'm just going to sort of crop the start of it off, and I'm just going to just drag it right down, drop it right on top. We're just going to sort of crop it off right here at the end, or at our edit point right here at the end. So the transition is going to come in, and it's going to transition from this shot into the next shot. Now what's important to keep in mind here is that I need to extend these down just a little bit. I need to extend this down because what's going to happen is that when I adjust the scale of this to make it full frame and I adjust the scale of this shot here to make it full frame, you're not going to see this shot here underneath. So all I'm going to do is just come back here, and what I like to do here when I'm working in Premiere Pro is I like to work in my CS 5.5 workspace. Very nice. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to come into the motion drop down. We're just going to increase the scale a little bit here. There we go. And for our next shot, I'm going to take, sure, why don't we just take this shot here of just the kids at the playground sort of swinging back and forth. Very nice. And it's always very easy to figure out where the shot's going to go. Even if I delete this clip right here, let's just say I didn't even have it here. So how do I know where these edits are going to go? Well, you see I have the markers right up here at the top. All I'm going to do is just take this shot. We'll just sort of position it right about there. I'm just going to hold shift on the keyboard to snap to here. There we go. We'll do the exact same thing down here where we're going to want it to go out. Very nice. And let's just make sure. Perfect. You'll see that what happens is that it comes in, and right there is where we want the transition to happen. So let's take this shot here, again, double click, and we're just going to make it full frame. So I'm just going to come in, just adjust our scale here to make it full frame, and we'll come back here now, and you'll see that we have our transition come in just like such. Once it gets there, guess what? It transitions into the next shot. Now you're going to notice here that I don't have a transition between the second shot and the last shot. You might be thinking, oh, well, the team at Digital Juice must have forgot something, but they actually didn't. I'm going to come back to the main timeline here for a second. I want you to take a look at what actually happens here. Our little video window comes out. We have our first shot there. you'll see there's our transition into the second shot, but what happens here is that the actual video wall does the transition on its own. So that's why I don't need that extra transition here, sort of that glitch transition. But we need to add in our next shot here, so let's do that. What I'm going to do is just snap right there to that marker. I'm just going to double click in here. And let's come right down here. We're just going to take our last shot, which is our soccer shot here. It's going to drag it again right to about here. We'll just crop it off. And of course, again, we'll just crop the end off here. There we go. Very nice. And again, we need this to be full frame, so we'll just adjust our scaling here. Very cool. And you'll notice that when I came back here, I wasn't entirely happy with the framing of this. She should be more centered in the frame. So how do I get in and actually adjust that? Well, it's actually very simple. All I'm going to do is come back to my drop zone here. I'm just going to take her position and just slide it over here. Let's actually undo that because I need to make sure that I have the right thing selected here. There we go. Just going to slide her over like such. When I switch back, you're going to see that she's a lot more centered in the frame. Very cool. And that's perfect, just like that. Our next shot is just the girl swinging back and forth, so I'm happy with that. And this one actually works out just perfectly. So there's our 3 shots ready to go with the transitions and everything. So now the only thing I need to do is now set up our chroma key. So let's do that. And I'm obviously first going to need a chroma key shot. So what I'm going to do is just import here. I'm just going to come back here to my recent places, because I believe I actually have in my recent places my chroma key talent. And I'm just going to select the mid shot of Mary Jane here. I'm just going to say open. And I'm going to delete our anchor man here. I can call him an anchor man because he's obviously a man there. I'm just going to hit delete on the keyboard here on both Mac and Windows. And I'm going to take the Mary Jane shot. I'm just going to drag it into the timeline. And I'm just going to unlink the audio from it because I don't need the audio for the purposes of what we're doing. And I'm just going to crop this off here just because I know there's a little bit of, there we go. There's a little bit of pre-roll here. I think that's looking pretty good. I just want to make sure that Mary Jane is talking the entire time, which she is now. Now, if you happen to watch the After Effects version of my animated shoulder sets tutorial, you'll see that I always have a technique as to how to place my talent before I actually get in and add the key effect. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to razor blade the end of this here. Just delete the last little bit. Very nice. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the clip. We're going to come down to opacity. Let's bring the opacity down, somewhere about 50%. And I'm just going to adjust the position here, right about there. That's looking pretty good. Let's just bring her back up to full opacity. Very cool. Now again, if you watch my After Effects version of the animated shoulder sets tutorial, you'll remember I did a garbage mat to get rid of all this green around here that I don't need. Well, you might think that, we really can't do that inside of Premiere, but we actually can. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to come over here to the Effects tab. I'm simply going to type in garbage. Don't you wish you could just sort of go to all tabs and just type in garbage and get exactly what you need? You wouldn't think that garbage would help you, but in this case, it's going to help us a lot. And you'll see as soon as I type garbage in, I now have an 8-point garbage mat, a 4-point garbage mat, and a 16-point garbage mat. Now, in most cases, 16 is going to be a little bit of overkill for what we need, so I'm just going to stick with the 8-point garbage mat here. I'm just going to drag and drop it right down here onto our shot. Now, you'll see as soon as I do, nothing has apparently happened. Well, the reason nothing has happened is because I haven't actually selected the effect. And once I do, you're actually going to see those points for our garbage mat. Now, what I'm also going to do here is I'm just going to zoom back a little bit here. Let's just zoom back to 25%. That's looking pretty good. Now, all I have to do is basically set my garbage mat up like such. Now, I don't think our arms come out too far. So we're just going to do our garbage mat like this. And I think we're going to be pretty good. And all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to switch back to fit here. And let's just scroll through to make sure her arms don't leave that frame. They don't. Perfect. I can even adjust the garbage mat a little bit just to bring this in, because obviously the less green we have, the better. I think we're doing pretty good here. Okay, so I'm ready to get in and actually add the key effect. And what I'm going to do here is I'm simply going to type in, not key as you might think, I'm actually going to type in Ultra, because we're going to use this fantastic keyer inside of Premiere Pro called, appropriately enough, Ultra Key. I'm simply going to take Ultra Key, we're going to drag and drop it right onto the shot that we want to use it on. Immediately you're going to notice that nothing has happened. What I'm going to do is just twirl up the 8-point garbage mat and everything else that I don't need access to right now, because Ultra Key is the only thing that I want to see. What I'm going to do first of all, before anything else, is obviously set my key color. I'm simply going to select the eyedropper, and we're going to navigate as close to our talent as possible, right about there, and I'm simply going to select it. And as soon as I do, you'll see that we kind of have something going on, kind of, sort of what we want, but not really. So what exactly is going on here? Well, let's take a look. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the output from composite to simply alpha channel. And you'll see that right now all of this is being disregarded. You can see where our garbage mat is actually coming into play. But we've got a bit of junk here that we need to get rid of, and it's not really helping us right now. So how do we get in and how do we adjust this? Well, it's actually very easy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate right over here into the Ultra Key effect. I'm going to drop down Matte Generation. And there's really only a couple of things that we're going to adjust inside of here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to adjust our blacks because we need to make sure that the area around her is completely black. And how we're going to do that is we're going to adjust the pedestal. And all I'm going to do is grab pedestal and just start dragging it a little bit higher. And you're going to notice as soon as I do, I start to lose a bit of the detail in the inner key here. But don't worry about that. We're going to fix that in just a second. I want to make sure that I'm happy with the blacks, which in this case I am. Now what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the inside of our key, and I'm going to do that by simply adjusting the transparency. What we're going to do is we're actually going to back off on it a little bit, just kind of like that. I think that looks pretty darn good. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch back from alpha to composite and take a look. Our key is actually looking very, very nice. Except there's something going on that I actually don't want, and it's not really helping me. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to zoom in a lot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom into about, well, I don't know, about 200%. And what I'm going to do is just drag our window over here so I can see our talent. You can see that we actually have something going on here that we don't want. We actually have a green haze around the edge of our talent. What I'm going to do here is just come all the way down right to where her purple shirt meets her white pants. And what we're going to do is we're going to navigate right down here to spill suppression. And once we're at spill suppression, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate right down to spill, and I'm going to start dragging the value up until that green matches the purple color of her shirt, which is right about there. That's looking a lot better than it did before. Here's what it looked like before. I'm just going to punch in 50. You can see lots of green. What I'm going to do now is punch in 70. And you'll see that purple's now looking more like what it should. Except we've run into a bit of a problem now. And the problem is that her pants aren't the right color anymore. Her pants are more of a purple color. This is what it was before. Much nicer, much more white. This is what it looks like now. Her pants now have that purple sort of hue to them. So now what do? Well, we could, spend a lot of time in here tinkering to get what we want, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to add another effect here. I'm just going to hit the X here to get rid of Ultra. We're going to come into Video Effects. I'm going to come all the way down to the Color Correction section here. I'm just going to drop down Color Correction. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come all the way down, and the effect that we're going to add is the Fast Color Corrector. I'm simply going to add it. I'm going to drag it right over here onto our Mary Jane shot right under Ultra Key. And believe it or not, I'm not going to get in, I'm not going to adjust any of the hue, balance, anything like that. All I'm going to do is simply choose white balance. I'm going to select white balance. I'm going to come over to her pants, and I'm going to click on it and take a look now. We now have our pants looking white, and the best part is that if I zoom back in here to 200%, we just move over a little bit here, guess what? That green is pretty much gone. We got a bit of a tinge of it here, but we got rid of all of it on the edge. There's not much we're going to be able to do to get rid of that only because of the way that this was shot. We could get in and do some further color correction if we wanted to, but I'm really happy with this. Why? Because when I zoom back to look at this full frame, I don't see any of that green around the edge of her. And let's put it this way, that is what's most important. You don't need to get in and adjust everything so that it's 100% gone, because as long as you can't see it, that is what is most important. So now you can see that what I have is I've got my talent chroma keyed over top of my fantastic Digital Juice Videotracks HD footage inside of my animated shoulder set. So I hope this tutorial has shown you how simple it is to get in, not only work with these elements in the juicer, but get into Premiere Pro and really be up and running with them and create fantastic looking keys for your footage in no time flat. So if you have any questions, you have any comments, or you have any tutorial requests, you can head on over and post them in the Digital Juice forums. This has been Kevin P. McAuliffe. Thanks a lot for watching.